Well, welcome to our January 17th post-service discussion. We have the Reverend Stephen Landale with us, who gave a fantastic service titled "Turn the Other Cheek, Walk the Second Mile." And I know I have a lot to say, and I imagine our congregation does as well. Would anybody like to start?
Sure, I'll
Oh,
start.
okay. All right. So how about we'll go JC, then Joanne.
Okay. I'm totally receptive to how you explain this rather confusing saying of Jesus. And so that part of it was wonderful. The really weird part of it was yesterday. I heard myself saying, as a child, I really believed in Jesus and the truths of how he spoke. As I came away from Christianity, it was as I went through the creed, I eliminated one thing after the other until I found myself standing outside of Christianity, but not outside of Jesus. And they really messed him up for me by all of the things that Christianity expected of him or saw him as being, rather than just his teachings. And this one is just beautiful. It's something every mother already knows, because you know better than to argue with a child. So you distract by the second time you go around whatever it is. And so, yeah, we know how to do this. We just need to remember to do it, which means everything that you said. Holding yourself, saying, down, girl, down. Now, this is a whole person. Speak to some other aspect of his or her wholeness. Thank you, Stephen.
You're welcome. And thank you for sharing that.
Uh-huh.
Wonderful insight. Every mother knows these things.
Yeah. Great. Joanne, go ahead.
Stephen, I wanted to thank you basically for your sermon. I've been through many traditions of religion and not, and I know, as most of us know innately and by teachings, all that you have said today. And we try to do exactly as you said, but sometimes life gets in the way. And I want to thank you for reminding me.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing that I'm curious about, one of the questions that came up was I've always felt it important to come back to the Bible periodically within the UU tradition, because that is the UU tradition is rooted in that. And then, biblical stories and the role of Jesus had kind of, shall we say, fallen out of fashion, right, within the UU community. I know, I can tell you for our congregation, 10 years ago, for somebody to be talking about Bible stories or Bible parables would have been met in the congregation with some degree of, trepidation. What do you think it is about the national church, or just the movement in general of UU-ism that has that it seems like there's a reevaluation of the validity of biblical stories?
I'm not sure I can speak to it as well because I've just been keeping, foot in the UU world, and I'm actually now a member as well of First Christian Church in town, which is a very progressive Christian church. But this started before the swinging. There's a kind of pendulum swinging. So I think the swing toward humanism and some, I would say I wouldn't say anti-religious, but it was really because there's typically a lot of openness to Buddhism, for instance. it was very strong in the 50s and 60s and into the 70s even. Um, I think when I was in divinity school in the 90s, there was I think just a re-embracing of spirituality and to some degree of tradition. Um, so I'm not sure what exactly led that, but to some degree it may just be a sense of, wow, we've gone way over this far and we're getting some intellectual activities in our churches, but we don't feel spiritually satisfied. So I think that's part of it. And I think that I experienced as a minister, I guess a lot of, I mean, not just trepidation, but sometimes hostility towards things Christian. A lot of people have been just burnt, come to UU fellowship because they feel like this is the only place I would think to go because I was raised and had the Bible shoved down my throat by some other tradition, or was taught that I was wrong and bad because of my sexuality, or so on and on. I just encountered so many harmful aspects of Christianity, or they didn't want any part of it. So I totally understand where those hurt feelings are coming from. So I guess I'm not really answering as clearly. Why is it started? Your question is kind of, why is the pendulum swung back somewhat? Why are people more comfortable? So I guess part of it is people are general. There's a wanting more of a spiritual experience on Sunday mornings, not just intellectual insight. Not just something for our heads, but for our hearts. And so that's created a little more opening for religious sources in general. Even if things don't seem, if you don't agree with it perfectly intellectually, you can see there's some value to it. And I'm not sure. I think there's been a Christian UU group, and that's probably had some influence. But back to your congregation, what's changed in the last 10 years in Roseburg?
It's a good question. Yeah, it's certainly a different congregation. It's just something that I've noticed, and leading with the heart is something that JC's been talking about for weeks now in these discussions. So it seems like there's some commonality there. Laleen wanted to jump in.
I did want to respond to that, Stephen, because I would think of myself as someone who, for almost my entire life was really turned off by Christianity and Christian thinking, growing up as a lesbian and having been so condemned by people who used that religion to do so. And so what I have seen, certainly as more and more Christian churches move further and further to the right, it seems to me that in what I experience and what I read in UU newsletters and online is that as a faith, we have moved more to pure Jesus thought, separating that aspect of what we think of as Christianity out from so much of that which has been spoken by others and passed off as the words of Jesus. So I don't flinch anymore. and I really used to flinch. And I know choosing to make our UU church my church home, which it is my first church home, was based very strongly on that. We have one person in particular, one church member who actually does sermons for us occasionally on various aspects of Christian religion. And the first time I heard it, I wanted to leave. Why is this in here? Then I listened and I realized, no, he's teaching me something very different about Christian thought. but more importantly, about Jesus' thought, uncontaminated by the thoughts of others. So that's kind of the way I would
Yes.
read it.
Mhm.
Just chime in. I know a couple people are on talk of. I think something else that I think the Neoprene verses,
Oh, hey, Stephen, real quick, your audio dropped out a little bit.
Huh.
Oh, okay, you're back.
Is that
Yeah.
better? Okay.
Yeah.
It might be an internet connection
Yeah.
issue.
Could be, yeah.
We're about 6 feet to the left of where I recorded the sermon and 6 feet away from me. So we'll move if we need to. But
Okay.
I think also UU communities, churches, fellowships became more part of interfaith groups for social justice and so forth, including LGBT concerns. And so I think there was just more exposure and cooperation, realizing, wait, there's some really liberal Christian churches here. They got a rainbow flag too, and they talk about Jesus differently. And so I suspect that's been part of it. And I think there's also a sense of shifting away from what we don't believe, and I still bristle, honestly, when I see UU websites that say, basically, you're free to believe whatever you want, or, you're free to search, and also too much emphasis on the search, because at some point you've got to say, well, don't we find some truths? And spiritual life, not just about searching for truth, but being accountable to the partial truths we found, and trying to live up to those truths that we found. However, even if we change our mind about them a little bit in 10 years, or so I think as that awareness grew, that it's something about practice and being accountable to imperfect truths, that then you become open to more teachings and things. And it's not just about search and rejection. If that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's a great answer. And just so you know, Stephen, this is your Sunday. You're our guest of honor, and so anytime you want to respond to anything, just chime in. So, Sharon wanted to talk. Yeah.
I was quite impressed with your presentation, Stephen, and I really appreciate your returning to the message of Jesus, because I, like JC, found myself stripping off parts of the creeds. In my church, we use 3 different ones in alteration. And I always would go back to, what was Jesus really teaching? And I discovered if I left out what Jesus was teaching, I could not talk to people outside of the UU church in order for me to hear them or for them to hear me. And so it was the common ground so that we could really listen to one another. And when you were talking about walk side by side, sit side by side, be silent, show your humanness so the other person can show their humanness. It reminded me of a podcast I was listening to. The host is Brene Brown, and the name of it is Unlocking Us. And this week she was just expressing her thoughts. She did not have anybody to interview. And she said that racism and violence continue because the others are dehumanized.
Absolutely.
They are referred to as animals, as bugs, as rodents, as non-human beings. And that allows other people to start viewing people of color, people of other nations, the foreigners, to be less than human. And that's how it propagated among our ancestors. No, it's just a shameful life that we were given. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for putting it that way. So I'm glad you just articulated that. Yeah, it's. I think humanism and Christianity overlap very much around this area you're talking about being aware that we are human to human and not being dehumanized. And you should always have the prickles on your back go up whenever you hear human beings being referred, language like they're creeping across the border or they're swarming across the border, verbs that are usually applied to insects or something like this. That's all the stepping stone language to stepping on them, justifying violence. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Glennis had something to say.
Well, one of the things that really struck me about what you were saying was the result of the turn the other cheek, thinking through what would happen then if you gave them your cloak too. And it is a way of thinking that I hadn't actually arrived at until today. Because if you think through to the actual end result, you can see how this works in almost every case. And so I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Yeah.
I did. Almost say something.
Well, and I'll thank Mark Bellatini, who was my divinity school instructor and a UU minister, Columbus. He's probably retired now, or he's gone a long time. So he brought out these aspects of the Gospels for me, and I read more and found that others. There's humor in the Gospels.
Yeah.
The first miracle that Jesus makes in the Gospel of John is when he's ordered by his mother to make wine. So if you read the whole water to wine story in the Gospel of John, it goes something like this. Miracle boy, they need some wine at the wedding. Why don't you do your trick? And Jesus is like, Mom, it's not yet my time. And then she completely ignores Jesus and is like, bring the water over, he'll do it. And then he does it. I mean, that's the first miracle. Making it with the miracle boy language, but you can almost hear him whining in it. I mean, his first miracles against his will and at his mother to make wine at a wedding. It's helpful to read the gospel slowly. I did this with a Bible study group. We called it Beer and Bible because we would have a beer called Blind Faith. We got this Vermont beer called Blind Faith. This is in Rhode Island. And would have to and read the Bible really slowly and act out parts of it. And really experience it differently, the characters and everything, really differently.
I imagine that the beer helped quite a bit with
But you had a non-drinking atheist, a dry alcoholic atheist.
And it's funny you bring up that story in particular, because I believe that the translation of Jesus's response is, "Woman, what has this to do with me?" Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Literally. Yeah. Oh, I know. Yeah. Literally wanted to say something, and then we'll have Connie.
I don't know. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I was very impressed, Stephen. Thank you so much for your talk today. It really hit home for me. I recall a in-depth conversation with a friend of mine that he had said that Jesus wasn't real, and that he was a figment of a group imagination to write the Gospels or whatever. And I says, well, I really don't care whether he was real or not. As far as I was concerned, what he had to say was the real thing. And what you pointed out today, turning the other cheek, again, that was a very deep interpretation, because I was never that deep in my years of growing up. I just I thought, okay, I could envision this person turning their cheek, but in actuality, the way I interpreted what you said today, it was a metaphor for doing to the others. Anyway, I'm getting my words all screwed up, but I just wanted to express my appreciation. It was very, very well received. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to say, I think there is a way to do it literally, though, too, even though it's metaphorical most of the time. But literally, if somebody, gives you a backhanded slap to put you in your place, this is what you do. You say, oh, no, we're not having that. You can go ahead and assault me, which is what John Lewis did, and which is what people in civil rights did, by and large. So.
Yeah. And actually, with Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and leaders of that ilk promoting a pacifist way of getting their message across, I hope before this conversation is over, we'll be able to talk about that, like nonviolent resistance and the efficacy of that in changing the world. But before we do any of that, Connie had something to say.
I just wanted to go off subject for just a second.
Okay, we don't.
Just a
Okay,
second.
all right, be quick.
Okay, today is Betty White's 99th birthday. Thank you.
Yes. Well, happy birthday to Betty. Yeah, go ahead, Connie.
Stephen, I just have to say to you that this was a talk that engaged my heart and my emotions. And I want to tell you how in the beginning, over your talk or your sermon, I became like that little kid in Sunday school who was enchanted with the stories. And it was such a good feeling, like I got into the emotion of and not going off on my intellectual thoughts of it. So by the end of it, and then when you sang the last song, I was just in tears. I mean, I was so involved. And I want to really thank you for your talk today. I wanted to just say a couple things about, I always circle things that I'm going to think about more. And one of them was your comment about openings through the walls that separate us. I love that. I love thinking about that. And asking a question and surprise them with your humanness. And what would it take for you to step out of your role? So those are the things I'm going to be thinking about the rest of this week. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I want to reflect back to, I'm hearing a lot of people having a felt experience during the sermon and service, but I want to Glennis and Michael for that, because you think of the main sermon as the main event, but it was really set up and followed. The music was beautiful. And Glennis, it was very, you all, when the sermon began, you all, and I was watching it in a meditative frame of mind. We weren't headspace critical, where's an idea that I can debate kind of mindset. We were kind of in this, hey, let's receive something that can make us people, that can help us feel connected to something larger, feel love going in and out. And then the song and that image of people holding hands says so much. So part of what you're sharing with me is your response to the whole service. So thank you. You really got to I'm sure it's been an adjustment coming from live services, but there's some things you're doing online that you maybe wouldn't do as well. Or at least different. So thank you.
Yeah, well, and thank you for saying that. One of the conversations that Sunday service is often having is what can we do to preserve what we're doing well in the lockdown and continue that when we get back to being in person. Laline.
real quickly, Stephen, that's probably one of the most meaningful things that I have heard in a long time. And thank you. I don't know if Glennis would do this, but I will. We work really hard as service leaders, faithfully to try to create that kind of an energy when we're talking to nothing. And it's almost never recognized. So, thank you so much.
Yes.
Yay, Glennis.
We're kind of like the church mothers who are like, nobody ever appreciates us. Yeah.
Really great.
Well, can we talk real quick about pacifism and because one thing that struck me, no pun intended, about the it's like finally we have minister abuse on camera for a sermon, which is fantastic. Is that in order to turn the other cheek after being struck, you've got to still be standing, right? Yeah. And so I would say, is there a time not to turn the other cheek? I see you, Lily, and I just want to give Stephen a chance.
Well, I want to hear other people's response. I have something
Okay.
to say. I want to hear anybody else have a response to that.
Okay. I saw Lillian's hand go up. Did anybody else? Okay. Oh, okay. Then sure. Okay. Yeah, go for it, Lillian. And then...
I had a really strong reaction. I had to take some deep breaths not to let that overshadow the rest of it. And I think for me, Stephen, what happens is when I hear various kinds of, be it sermons or other, teachings on nonviolent responses, it taps into, for me, a whole lifetime of having been in really violent kinds of situations, of which we most recently have had one. And I always want a disclaimer somewhere in there that acknowledges that there are some situations, that are so psychopathic. And for me, I mean, it was just being born Jewish, and having everything that was going on in Nazi Germany, and people coming back, that started off my life with an understanding that you cannot turn a cheek and go meekly somewhere, or take it to the Watts riots in '64, or the entire, I was part of desegregating lunch counters, in buses in the South, and that preceded the Watts riots. And then we just add to, 1968 or Kent State, or we go on and on. And so somehow I just always want that disclaimer that there's mob reality, or there are people like some of the white supremacist groups who are so motivated by their own belief system that turning the other cheek, it's more get out of the way, just get out of the way. So I just had a need to say that piece is often missing for me. And were it more present, would feel easier to go totally into the nonviolent training that I had, that I live by. But every time something like the Capitol comes up and I see those faces and I see that level of craziness, I find it really deeply frightening to think about being nonviolent in that setting.
Yeah, I want to respond. I think you make a really good point that it can't always be applied in the same way. In a sermon, I said, towards the end, at these protests are not necessarily the best time to try to change someone's mind, connection. And I think what I get a lot from it, from the Gospels and from nonviolence teachers, Gandhi taught, his methods were varied, you know what I mean? When nonviolence teachers, they get to say, and it was really a spiritual exercise, kind of discerning in a way, what does Spirit call us next to do? You can't just keep repeating the same thing. And there are times when you need to run away. And something that's not as well known, King even said, there are times when violence may be necessary. But he said, in America, with the free press, it's not necessary. So there's another civil rights leader who said there's a big effort to make Martin Luther King the Uncle Tom of the century, and to make MLK the militant. And he said, actually, and MLK, Malcolm X. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, at least towards the end of their lives, were closer than they thought. Malcolm X's militancy softened, and King said, the reason I'm promoting these methods, he is hoping that some people will be changed, but it was more about seeing it on the news, and then, people pressure their representatives, and change comes from federal government. That's what happens. But he said, if there's places where you don't have that medium of change, then violent resistance may be the only option. That's not.
Well, he also said, cover your head and bend over.
Yeah, and there's times that, right. Yeah, there are. So it's really different. But I think it's a spiritual discernment's really important to say what's called for now. But the goal is, how do I not be in these roles? How do I not be a victim in the situation?
Mm-hmm.
And how do I improve the odds on some kind of human encounter?
That is so profound. We could like the idea that in a society with a free press, that violence is much less necessary is a deeply profound statement as far as I'm concerned. Sorry, I'm editorializing too much. Sharon wanted to.
Goodness gracious, so many thoughts I could, talk to each individual person. I've always been struck, I could have chosen a better word, by the story about if somebody strikes you on your cheek, turn the other. And it wasn't until Stephen in his sermon suggested that it was a backhanded slap that I had never considered. And then for the return blow to not be a punch. I was always thinking of it, one was a slap and the other one was a slap too. But Stephen, you made the distinction that a slap would have been to a subordinate to heel, so to speak. And I'm going to think about that for a while. And secondly, wasn't Martin Luther King, besides studying Jesus, studied on civil disobedience by Thoreau?
Yeah, Thoreau and Gandhi. So
and as well as Gandhi. And there's just so much meat in all of those teachings that I didn't think about the free press. But the sermon today has been so rich with reminders of times I was unaware of turning the other cheek because I felt like a victim. But I was really turning my other cheek. So thank you.
You gave me, there was a moment right there. I don't know what you were experiencing, but I'd like to put out a question, a kind of personal question for you or anybody. Can you think of a time where you did something the equivalent of, it doesn't even have to be a physical altercation, where you held your ground in a way that was both courageous and vulnerable, and had an impact on the other person. So it was both, the person was expecting to bully you, or maybe it isn't exactly that, but something like that. Have any of you experienced that? Would you be willing to share?
Oh.
Yeah, I would love to do that. Maybe as we get closer to wrapping up. We do have a queue go. It's a great question, Stephen, and
Okay.
and I definitely want to get to it.
All right, I'm going to put the chat on so I can see the queue.
Yeah.
Just a process thing. I could go to about 12:25.
Okay, sure thing. Sure
Okay,
thing.
I think I said 12:15 originally, so it won't be quite as.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Usually we go to 12:30. That's
Oh.
okay. I mean, you like you're being very generous with your time. So
Okay, well,
let's have
next meeting again, so yeah.
let's have Laura Lee and then Connie, and then maybe we can get to Stephen's general question.
Okay.
How about you?
In turning the other cheek, Michael had asked a question if anybody had experienced this, or I think if that was your question.
Well, Stephen's question was, could you give an example of when you've turned the other cheek?
I was married 1,000 years ago to my first husband, and I married him because he had two beautiful sons that he had full custody of. What I should have asked at the time was, why did his wife leave him? I found out why. He was very abusive, not only physically, but mentally. And we were 500 miles north of the Canadian border. And I had it. I had turned the other cheeks many times. And so I just packed up the boys and brought them to Southern California, where my family was. Saw an attorney and ended up, the attorney said you could be held for kidnapping because I had no jurisdiction over the children. So I went up to Northern California, where his boys' paternal grandmother lived. Long story short, I sought out the biological mother, went to court. She got custody of the boys. The judge was very magnanimous in telling me that if he had any legal and moral right or road to go, that he would give the boys to me, which meant a lot to me. But anyway, so this at times I turned the other cheek, but then I just walked away, and it did change him somewhat. Although he was a paranoid schizophrenic, so it was difficult for him to change that much. But it did change me, and it did change my stepson's lives to the better. So I think I answered some question. I don't know.
No, that's good. That's good. Yeah, let's move to Connie, then we can open it up a little bit more.
Well, I was kind of going back to your comments about nonviolence, if violence comes to us. But when Stephen was talking about turn the other cheek, I guess I was still in that little kid mode, because I thought of when, not so much, I don't remember my mother being a slapping person, but I saw a lot of slapping as a kid. And the slapping to me always entailed, you're not listening. And so I thought on that in terms of the violence that we confront. Though those people, in my mind, are kind of saying to us, you're not listening, and so their reaction is violence. But I think oftentimes the message to us is you're not listening. And so not in the heat of a riot, but at times I think there are moments where I could, like we've talked about, engage with people and really let them know I'm listening. I want to hear, you gave an idea of where we say, but how do you feel about that? Questions like that. So my nonviolent response is to listen to what that action is telling me. And then when I can, make that an opportunity to open up to talking to people.
Yeah.
Thank you. A good exercise going forward in the next week is even looking at our national situation.
Yeah.
Try to ask ourselves, to imagine even people expressing violence as saying, you're not listening. That's
Mhm.
a powerful way to interpret it. Now, it doesn't excuse it.
No.
And we have to draw boundaries. But I think if we're going to heal this tremendous cultural divide that we have in this country right now, that's increasingly playing out in families and things, especially with the QAnon stuff. That being ready to ask that, and just say what to feel this person's expressing, they're not being heard,
Yeah.
and then a genuine curiosity.
Hmm.
Tell me what's going on. What's at stake for you? So this gets into nonviolent communication, it's a separate topic with Marshall Rosenberg, but really saying what's at stake for this person. Thank you.
Yeah. Kim was next.
Okay. First off, I kind of fainted nearly when I was hearing Bible verses being read. 'Cause I've never really heard you guys talk about Bible verses. So after I picked myself up, it seems that we have opinions over something that if you don't agree with someone's opinion, people get really upset and like block you from something or just don't want to listen to you, get mad at you because you're not agreeing with what they're thinking. And so they start name calling you and saying you're dumb or you're racist or whatever. So it's a shame that we can't talk to each other and discuss different opinions without getting all upset and mad. When I'm talking to somebody, I'm not trying to change one's opinion. I'm just stating my opinion, and then we go on from there. So what I was reading further on in the Luke, you had it was Luke 37. I continued reading on. It says that you should not judge other people's opinions. Well, that's what I'm putting on there, because that's not for us to judge each other in our own opinions. We should be able to have our own opinions and talk about them without being scared or, because somebody doesn't agree with your opinion. Let's see. It's just not fair to be worried that someone's going to shoot you because you have an opinion and they don't agree with it. And then in Luke 42, it says, how can you take a speck out of somebody's eye when you have a big plank inside your eye? I remember hearing that a couple of sermons ago. So when you're yelling at a person or something because of your opinions and you don't like what they're saying, you have your own plank in your eye and you're not allowing other people to have their opinions. And I just think that's what we need to come to as a country. We need to value each other's opinions for what they say and not be upset because you don't agree with it. You can still not agree with it. You just can't be wanting to shoot somebody or beat up somebody because they have an opinion and it's not yours. I just feel like, if we all can get along and learn to disagree with each other, that will solve a lot of our problems we have in the communities.
Preach it, sister. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and just to piggyback on that for a second, there has been an idea, particularly on college campuses, that to engage with somebody else's opinion, is to platform them. And there are certain views that we should not be platforming, right? Hence it's always appropriate to punch a Nazi mentality. And so the idea of like walk that second mile would definitely be in opposition to that stance, to that principle that we ought not to platform ugly ideas. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'd like to follow up. I remember at Charlottesville,
Yep.
I was on was it Charlottesville? Yeah. On I think a UU clergy web, some kind of chat. And there was this, somebody had been outed, this like 21-year-old kid from upstate New York was there. And people just made his life hell.
Mm-hmm.
He was at the rally on the right. And so there was a little debate about this. And a minister who I'd respected somewhat kind of said, "Oh, boo hoo hoo.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, too bad. He's supporting Nazi ideas." I just kind of thought, and she was a Christian UU minister too. I thought, boo hoo hoo. I mean, he's 21 years old. Yes, he was, he might have been holding a flag or something. He's a kid. His brain isn't fully developed. And he literally got chased out of town. So, are you going to show him some compassion, understanding, and maybe bring him back into a human fold? Or like, what's it going to accomplish by mocking him and pushing him out?
Right.
Who's going to accept him then? This group that you don't want him to be part of.
Yep.
I mean, so I was really shocked at that and disturbed. And I think that cancel culture stuff has just gotten way out of hand.
Okay.
Doesn't achieve, in my opinion. I understand that but I'm way on the side of free speech, and even though it's risky and stirs things up, anyway, it's another.
Well, yeah, thank you for amen. I totally agree. JC or Lillian, I didn't discern which one of your hands went up.
It is I.
JC.
Well, I have found my sense of humor oftentimes has me making really snotty remarks against during news time, television, etc. And since my values are really up for me right now, I realize I shall try to turn the other cheek. Instead of saying something snotty, just say something that might be opening. Okay? Don't let me get this. I'm so enjoying saying these sparkling, laughable put downs that I probably am developing a bad habit. So do what I can to remember to turn the other cheek. I did not dream of interfering with that. It's wonderful. I had to talk a really different commentary.
Well, who knows what Martin Luther King said when he was home with his family, or
That's true.
And I mean, I do think it's important to have some permission to just say whatever you really feel in the moment and snarky and laugh it off, and then say, okay, when I'm face to face with people, I'm not going to say this. So I actually think it's okay, as long as it's good to pay attention and saying, am I feeding the beast?
Yeah.
I'm making this is this who I am now, to always say these things.
It's so healthy. You have to have a release somewhere.
Yeah, you need a release.
You can't do it in your own home with your partner who loves you and she's talking to the television. Where else are you going to do it?
I mean,
So it's good to start to make this other awareness come first. I know I can do it with a child, but everybody knows you don't argue with children. But that doesn't mean I should treat grown-ups as if they're children that I shouldn't be arguing with. That's not the place to come from. I can't imagine grown-ups that would say you're one who argues.
We've got a few minutes left with Reverend Stephen. I wonder if anybody would mind, maybe somebody we haven't heard from yet, would mind answering his questions about a time in which you had to stand up for yourself. I want to make sure I get this right. Would you mind restating the question, Stephen? And
yeah,
I see Paul. So.
I might broaden it and just say a time where you turned the other cheek in a way that was both maybe a little confrontive, but also relationship building, or walk the second mile with someone.
Right.
Made an effort to share time and space with someone. It's time, these moments of, it's like when I'm really trying to get at the sermon, it's like these moments of when we go from, I'm the bully, you're the bully, or I'm this and this, and it breaks away and it's human to human, have any of you experienced that?
Yeah, and I saw Paul's hand go up. So yeah, let's hear from Paul.
I was drafted for the Vietnam War in high school, and I was always a anti-war proponent. Philosophically, I didn't believe that we belonged in that war, so I applied for the position of conscientious objector, and I had to appear before a panel of generals and admirals and higher up military people to explain myself in the process of applying for a conscientious objector. And being a high school senior, I had never experienced the type of affront that I had with this panel of military people. They really laid into me in the process of trying to determine whether they should grant me the 1CO classification. And I think that they were trying to get some sort of a rise out of me, or some sort of a negative reaction. And I just kept turning the other cheek during this process. I guess I turned it enough times to actually be granted the 1CO classification. But that was quite an experience, and to realize that the best thing I should do is to take it and keep my mouth shut.
Well, in modern parlance, the internet has given us a term that I appreciate greatly, and that is that the hill you want to die on?
Yes.
So Stephen, I know you have to run. I wonder if it's not too much trouble, could you send us a benediction or a closing thought, or? Oh, you're taking this seriously.
No, yeah, I'm just thinking about it a little bit. Well, no, I think just let's go forth and really trust that whatever you have seen that's best in people, the person you love the most, the person you respect the most, that there might be a hint of that in everybody you meet. So there might be a spark of the divine in everyone, but there's a spark of the best person in the world. There might be. And what would it be like to live with that? And just a bit of curiosity, and say that spark might be covered over with all kinds of bad habits, anger and hate, and you might not get to it. But I think if we can go forth really trying to do that, and it's we didn't talk about this much, but it's hardest to apply often in our families and friends and things like this. So hope we can go forth trying to whatever we took from today into our relationships.
Yeah. Well, I know I speak for everyone when I say thank you so much. This was a great conversation with you after a great service. So I know that we'll be looking forward to the next one.
You're welcome.
So.
And did I send a print copy? I think somebody was reading it, so I must have, right? I don't know if I did.
I'm not sure. I didn't receive a copy, but yeah.
Because I had because I might have forgotten to do it. So
okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. So maybe we can continue the conversation a little bit longer since we have a little bit more time. Does anybody want to do like a rapid fire? And Paul's back. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for that story as well.
What happened? Maybe I said the wrong thing, and the powers cut me off.
Yeah, the internet police are watching, for subversive thoughts. They're like, get that Paul out of there. So So I am still curious about Stephen's question, if any of you would like to briefly give your testimony. Well, I can say for myself, that since my firing at Umpqua Community College, I can tell you for sure that the idea of fighting back against reputation destroying rumors, is a lesson that I have had to learn over and over again about the futility of that if people want to make up their minds about you, that there's very little you can do to affirm that you are indeed a person of nobility and honest intents. So that's been my experience with being attacked, and having to turn the other cheek. Yeah, Connie.
Well, I want to say something to that, where you said there's very little you can do. I think the opposite. There is a lot that you've been doing, so I don't think it's true there's very little that you can do. I think you can do what you've been doing, is showing people parts of yourself that they never knew. And because of that, I think, and I include myself, I appreciate so much these Zoom meetings, because I know a side of you that I never got to see.
Oh, well, thank you, Connie.
So I think you are showing us different parts of yourself.
Well, that is heartening. Thank you. And I wouldn't want to make this about me. So, but
No.
I do appreciate that. Yeah, go ahead, Laleen.
I agree with Connie 100%, Michael. And I had the same experience a while back at the UU, where there was a struggle. And it happened around elections. I don't want to go into the details, but somebody read a letter that said some really untrue, unkind things in the entire congregation about me. And I had to make, a decision in that moment. And I just stood up as loudly as I could. And I said, that is not true. And the person reading the letter immediately admitted it was not true.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't untruth. And I left the congregation for a while, and I really had to look at it and say, now, wait a minute. Someone said something really negative, or someone's a small group of people. And am I going to let that define me? Or am I going to come back with who I am, and what I have to offer, and, be the person that I know I am, rather than how someone else defined me. And I respect you, because I know how hard that is, when a lot of people are talking and not to your face, and have only half truths because they've heard their half truths from somebody else. And even though somebody might have said that that's not true, that doesn't mean that everybody, doesn't believe that. So firsthand, I have a tremendous amount of respect for you, and for getting to know you, and for the struggles that we've had, because we both have strong opinions and personalities. But
I don't know what you're talking about.
I really like you. I really respect you.
We've never butted heads.
He's being sarcastic again.
No, and Laleen, I have enjoyed working with you as well so much, especially over the last year or so. How about this? Now that we're winding down, can we agree that living honestly is perhaps one of the best approaches to changing our dynamic in the world?
I can agree with that.
Yeah. Sharon.
Michael,
Sharon? Oh,
after Sharon.
Yeah. We'll do Sharon, then Connie.
Okay.
Oh, did we lose Sharon?
No, she's here.
Oh.
I'm writing down your commission.
Oh, okay. All right.
Hearing you, Michael, and Laleen makes me recall the last 26 years that I've been part of this congregation. And there have been numerous people that have left
Mhm.
because of things that were said and never got straightened out, and they would not come back. And I too had to bear what I thought was some injustice.
Mhm.
And I left for a while until I figured out 3 people are not the whole congregation.
Good point.
So it's very valuable to hear what you've been saying. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And I think Madam President gets to close us out.
Well, I have to say a comment about what Sharon just said. In terms of, have those people who've left, have they been invited back?
Mm.
That's my question to us. And secondly, I have to say to Paul that I am so appreciative of these Zoom meetings because I didn't know Paul at all.
Mhm.
And I just can't wait until we meet in person so I can spend some time talking to Paul.
Me too.
You won't be disappointed.
Okay, I know.
Paul is a great time.
Yeah.
So yeah. All right. Well, hey, you all make my day. I always go lifted up after these discussions. So you have my gratitude. And yes, Sharon, we certainly can talk after Zoom. Have a wonderful Sunday. Can't wait to do it again in 1 week.
Thank you, Michael.
Bye all.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.